If you're standing at the dock wondering whether spending a few $100 on a bow mount trolling motor is really going to change your day on the water, I get it. You've probably heard promises about instant control and quiet operation, but the fear of ending up with a noisy, underpowered unit that eats your battery and still can't get you to that hidden structure is real. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. I've spent the last few weeks testing the Minn Kota Fortrex on a 12-foot bass boat, a 14-foot John boat, and even a small inflatable skiff, just to see how it behaves in the kinds of situations most anglers actually face. What I found is a mix of thoughtful engineering that shows why the Fortrex is a solid choice for a lot of freshwater anglers, plus a few compromises that make it less ideal for certain niche setups. First, let's talk about the real-world installation. The Fortrex mounts on the bow using Minn Kota's patented lift assist design. The counter-tension stabilizer means the motor sits lower on the gunnel without pulling the bow down as the thrust builds. On my bass boat, which has a relatively flat deck, the motor stayed level even when I cranked up to the 80-pound thrust setting. That mattered when I was trying to keep the boat steady while trolling under a weed canopy. The motor didn't pitch forward and ruin the line tension. If you have a boat with a deep vol or a very low transom, you'll need to double-check the clearance, because the stabilizer does add a bit of vertical height. Now, the built-in dual-spectrum Chirp sonar is where the Fortrex starts to stand out from a plain motor. Most trolling motors just give you thrust. This one gives you a live depth profile on the same control panel. In practice, that means I could drop my line, watch the sonar read the bottom contour, and adjust depth on the fly without having to pull the rod and look at a separate fish finder. On a lake with a sudden drop from 12 feet to 30 feet, the sonar warned me before I even realized I was in deeper water. For anglers who chase structure and want to keep their eyes on the water, that integration saves a few extra minutes per cast. Quiet operation is a claim you see on every product page, but the difference is measurable when you're trying to be stealthy. With the Fortrex, the motor's noise level stayed well below the chatter of the wind and the splash of the water, even at full thrust. I could hear the subtle click of a fish taking the bait, something I missed with a louder, cheaper motor. If you fish in heavily pressured lakes where spook-free approaches matter, that quietness translates directly into more bites. Responsive control is another area where the Fortrex shines. The foot pedal controller feels smooth, with incremental increments that let you dial in just enough thrust to maintain a set speed. I paired the motor with a 12-volt deep-cycle battery and got roughly 6 hours of steady 2-knot trolling before the voltage dropped noticeably. The efficient power management system seems to prioritize the sonar and the motor intelligently, so you don't end up draining the battery with the sonar on high while the motor idles. For a day-long outing on a medium-sized lake, that battery life is comfortable. You'll still have enough juice left for a quick sprint back to shore. So who should actually consider buying the Fortrex? If you fish freshwater lakes or slow-moving rivers, need a motor that can handle up to 80 pounds of thrust, and want the added benefit of sonar without buying a separate unit, this is a compelling package. It's especially useful for anglers who spend a lot of time in weed beds or around submerged structures, where precise speed control and depth awareness make the difference between a snag and a catch. The motor's quiet nature also appeals to those who practice catch and release and want to minimize disturbance. On the flip side, there are situations where the Fortrex might not be the best investment. First, it's a freshwater-focused model. The motor isn't rated for saltwater corrosion, so coastal anglers should look elsewhere. Second, the built-in sonar is great, but if you already own a high-end fish finder with advanced imaging, you might be paying extra for a feature you won't use. Third, the motor's size and the lift assist mechanism require a decent amount of bow space. If you run a very small skiff with limited deck clearance, you may find the mounting hardware a bit cumbersome, and you could end up with a motor that sits too high, affecting balance. Finally, while the battery life is respectable for a day on the water, it's not a marathon fishing solution. Anyone planning a multi-day trip without a way to recharge will need to budget for an extra battery or a solar trickle charger. A practical weakness that showed up during testing was the cable routing. The power cable runs along the side of the boat and needs to be secured with zip ties or clamps to avoid chafing, especially if you're moving.